Hi, and welcome to today's Facebook Live. My name is Lydia Tard, and I'm the lead keeper of invertebrates here at the Toronto Zoo. Here at the zoo, our mission is to connect people, animals, and conservation science to fight extinction. So in here is the invertebrate breeding center. It's affectionately known as the bug house, but we have a lot of other animals that aren't bugs. Bugs are basically insects that are six-legged creatures. And we have a lot of other animals. For example, one of the ones that we have right here is the South American bird-eating spider, which is actually a tarantula. I'm just going to take off the top here. You can have a little look at it. This is a female, and they're basically from South America, mainly Brazil, in Brazil actually, endemic to Brazil. And you can see that they're very, very large. They can get about 11 inches in diameter when they kind of spread out their legs. So they're a pretty big animal. Almost like a dinner plate. And you can see that it's got all 8 legs, so this is not an insect, it's a spider or arachnid. And it has, even though you might think that it has 10 legs, because it's got these other 2 legs here, or appendages, those are pedipalps, and they're not considered legs. So when you count the legs on a spider, you've got to kind of subtract the 2 pedipalps at the top. The one that we've got in this container here, so this is kind of like what kind of greets people when they first walk into the invertebrate breeding center. And we had that animal right there, which is the same as this one. It's a South American bird-eating spider. And you can see that she's laid a bit of a web there, and that's because overnight she just shed. And this is her shed here. So just have a look at that. Just put it in the box here, so it's kind of easy to get out and show you. But I want to show you the fangs. So she sheds her fangs. They basically shed their book lungs. They pretty much shed everything. So it's very costly for them, and they're extremely vulnerable at this time. It's going to take her about 48 hours to really harden up. And before that, when she first kind of came out, she's like tissue paper, so we always have to make sure that there's no crickets or any of her prey items in there with her, because they could maybe take a little bite out of her, and their blood is kind of like our arterial blood, and it's under pressure, and so if there's like a little cut or a nick, she could bleed to death if it's big enough. But anyway, she's made it, and I made sure that there was no crickets and things in there with her, so that she could successfully shed. All right, so I'm going to take you now to see another animal that, again, is not an insect, not a bug. It's a type of invertebrate. It's a crustacean. And these crustaceans are basically the insects of the sea, or the insects of the water. So anyway, here we are. This is one of my aquatic rooms, and she's in here. All right, I'm going to take it from under the side, put them underneath there. So this is called a Malaysian blue shrimp, and they're from Malaysia. They're actually a freshwater shrimp when they're adults, or when they're kind of, I guess, teenagers, or actually maybe even younger than teenagers. In the first part of their life, when they're eggs, they're actually deployed in salt water or brackish water. And then once they start looking kind of more like a shrimp, so they'll do all these different kinds of molts and stuff, and then when it kind of looks like a shrimp, it'll basically swim to fresh water. So this is kind of a really unique animal. We've had this animal for about 6 years now, maybe even longer. I've got to kind of look at her credentials and find out exactly when she first came. But she's doing very, very well. And they've got quite long claws. And soon, I think, again, she's going to shed soon. She's starting not to eat as much, and that's usually an indicator that she's going to shed. So they're very cool animals. And in Vietnam, even though they don't come from there, they've actually taken the babies and put them into their rice paddies. And so this is a secondary source of food, and also a source of money for them. So they can grow them in the ditches that are around the rice paddies, and it's just a second income for them. So she's pretty cool. Just going to put her top back on. And we'll just go over. So all these rooms here have various animals inside them. And maybe we'll do another session, and then you guys can have a look at those as well. So right now we're going to go into the greenhouse. And we've got some clay specters. These are a type of stick insect that resemble a dead leaf. Because they curl their abdomen, they also, sometimes people think of them as kind of being scorpion-like as well. And the really kind of cool thing about them, I'm going to blow on them, and you'll see them do a little dance. And they do this to try to pretend again that they're a dead leaf that's blowing in the wind, so that predators wouldn't actually know that it's a dead leaf or not a dead leaf. So they wouldn't draw their, I guess, or recognize them as something that they can eat. So it wouldn't draw attention to them. These animals eat eucalyptus, which is a very toxic plant, but they've evolved to be able to eat this plant. So it's quite very, very kind of neat that they can actually do that. Them and the koala bears. Actually, I could kind of show you. You'll see. So this here is a female, and the little skinny guy is a male. And the male actually has wings. I'm going to maybe grab one that's not, because I think he's there with his girlfriend there. But I'm going to grab this one here, and I'm going to show you. So these are the wings, and they can fly. And this is true of a lot of insects that can fly, is generally, or stick insects. Generally, the male is the one that is used kind of, all his energy is basically moved into or put into locomotion so that he can go around looking for girlfriends. Whereas the females tend to put all their energy into the eggs, and they tend to be a lot larger, and so they save all their energy for their eggs. So that's why they end up being kind of a lot larger and usually not as mobile. So make sure we don't close anybody up. And you can see there's some youngsters in here too, teenager ones. Over here, it's another container, and these are giant katydids, and these are soon to be adults. So these animals right here, the next molt, they'll get their wings, and they'll be much, much larger. They're a really cool animal. They're a nocturnal animal, so during the day they just kind of sit quietly. They don't. They pretend that they're leaves, and so sometimes even for myself it's very hard if they're not on the door, not on the side of the container like this, and they're inside the, where all the leaves and stuff are. It's very hard to find them, and usually I have to look at their antennae and I trace the threads back to the actual animal. And they eat cucumber and zucchini mainly. We also have this some yam and a bit of squash in there as well for them. And this gets changed every day. This food is also kind of their furniture, so we always have to kind of make sure we have enough of it in there, because these animals can get very big, and of course if one of them is sitting on it, then the other ones can't kind of partake of that food item. So we have to make sure that there's enough in there that they can all get some space and be able to feed. So I think that's
snails.
Oh yes, sorry. One more animal. So these are the snails. Oh, look at this. We've got one right on top of the lid here, oops. All right. So you can see kind of close up. These ones are kind of shy, so because I've kind of moved them now, they're retracted their antennae. So some of the antennae is there to taste. And then, of course, the other antennae are basically stalks for the eyes. So you can see a couple inside the container that I think have their stalks still out. And so you can see the larger ones are the stalks for the eyes. And then the other ones are more like chemical sensors. It's like they're tasting or smelling the air with those stalks. So again, these guys aren't bugs. They're a gastropod. They're a snail, obviously, but they are invertebrates. And invertebrates, of course, are animals without any backbones. And that's basically what this building has in it, is all the animals that have no backbone. So So they'll either have a shell or an exoskeleton that the muscles are attached to, and that's how they're able to move around or do, you know, various, go about their business of their life. That's how their muscles are able to kind of counteract each other so that they can actually move around and do what they need to do.
Lots of questions about the spider we could go back to.
Okay, is there lots of questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know the names of the snails?
No, we don't name them. Oh, it's just, sorry, West African. So these are called West African giant land snails. There was a question, I think that was asked. So these are West African giant land snails, and their genus name is Archacatina. So they're not considered the pest species. And I'm going to bring out a few. Actually, I think I've got some in there. But this for example is an egg. So it's almost as big as a bird egg, or some bird eggs is as big as a bird egg. So they're quite large. Whereas you get some of them, these are also have been introduced, and so they are kind of a bit of a pest species. But the other giant land snail that's much more of a pest species is an Achatina. So any Achatina genus, especially Ventricosa or Achatina, those animals all have very, very small little eggs, and they can lay about 1,500 each snail can lay about 1,500 a year, whereas these eggs here, maybe each snail can maybe about 150 eggs a year. So it's not as so we can kind of, but mind you, if they get out into a farm, it would be still difficult in a place where there's no winter. We're very lucky up here because if they got out, they wouldn't survive. So we don't have to worry about it so much.
How long do they live?
They live quite some time. So I want to say 6 years, 6 to 10 years.
This is what they eat, right?
Yeah, this is what they
talk
eat. Yeah, I just fed them today, so they get romaine lettuce and yam and apple. And we keep them moistened, so you can see how it's kind of wet in there. And that's what we do. We kind of give them a little bit of a sprinkle of water on their feed day, and that seems to keep the substrate and everything nice and humid for them. And it's always nice when you can kind of see them moving around with their stalks out and everything else. That means that they're properly hydrated. Otherwise, they would be inside their shell, and they would actually put a mucus layer on the outside to kind of plug it up so that they can keep all the moisture in. But the fact that these are all out, that means that we're providing the right conditions for them. So they're happy.
We had a question, what's the biggest insect in Canada?
Oh my goodness. In Canada, I want to say probably like a katydid, I think. There's some pretty big katydids that we have. There's also some pretty big beetles, like some of the beetles that have like fluorescent light on them. I forgot their names now, but I think that those would probably be some of the biggest ones. Yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to think about it, maybe answer it better next time. Is there any other?
Yeah, well, we had lots of questions about the spider. Maybe we'll go back and answer some more, because
Sure.
Lots of questions about why they have hair on them.
So those hairs, most spiders, there are a few spiders that have eyes. All spiders have eyes, but not all can see with them. So tarantulas, for example, can't see with their eyes. They can make out light and dark and shapes and maybe movement, but that's pretty much it. They get all of their information basically from those hairs and various other receptors that they have on their exoskeleton that will, vibration and stuff like that. They'll sense vibration, air movement, that kind of a thing. So, and then they also have some receptors that will kind of chemically kind of taste the air the way we smell it, and that's kind of how they get to know what's going on. Most spiders are nocturnal, so they don't really need to see, but they basically can kind of like feel, I guess.
Open that up again.
So you can see, yeah, so you can see this one. So the eyes are right here. She's got about 8 eyes all together clustered on top of her head there. But none of them, she can make out light and dark, and when she feels more comfortable, she'll look to go to a dark spot. This kind of acts as though it's a burrow for her because it has a top on it, so she feels very, very comfortable there.
And how can you tell females from males?
All right, so females tend to be much more robust, they tend to be larger. Males tend to be a lot thinner, and it's the same kind of thing like that I was telling you about the stick insects. They, again, are looking for females. The females will stay mainly around their burrow, and they'll get bigger, and they'll have all their eggs inside, being made in their abdomen, for example, whereas the males would have much smaller abdomens so that they can kind of really, really move around. And with that also comes a lot of nervousness. So you can even tell them by their behavior. The males will be very nervous. If I went to pop the top off like this, it might, kind of get startled, and it's looking just ready to take off at any moment. Whereas the females, they tend to be a lot more tolerant of movement and things like that. But the males also have special genital organs and things that's another way that we can tell. So from a shed skin, I can usually look at it with the microscope, and I can tell whether it's a male or a female. Even when they're little, I can kind of look at that shed skin, and I'm able to tell just by various structures around their genital opening.
Somebody asked what the smallest insect at the zoo might be that we have here.
Smallest insect? We used to have a whole pile of ants here, and so they were probably the smallest. We had some very, very small worker ants. We used to have leafcutter ants, and so they call them minims, and they're very, very, very tiny, and they're like the nursemaid ants that look after the eggs, that kind of like clean things, and maybe even help feed the babies once they hatch out. So they do a lot of that really kind of small tasks. So they were probably the smallest. Now, it just depends, because I do have some animals when they first hatch out, they're quite small, like the assassin bugs or even the lubbers that can be kind of small. So maybe those guys, or even the katydids when they first come out, they're kind of on the small side. Yeah, but before it used to be the ants for sure. They were really, really tiny.
Do the tarantulas make any noises?
Yes. So when they're breeding, or even when they get a little bit upset, not all tarantulas make the same kind of noises. You'll have different ones that are a bit louder and some that aren't as loud, but they do make noises. It's called stridulation, and so what they do is they kind of rub appendages or various body parts together. They'll also kind of sometimes drum on the ground, and that'll make kind of like a drumming sound. And we can actually hear it, but of course they're so sensitive to vibration, they can really hear that kind of a thing. And it happens a lot during courtship. So the animal will be drumming, and it'll be drumming to the female, "Are you receptive?" And then the female will drum back, "Yes, come on in. You can, come and hang around," or whatever. And so then he's able to go in. But then, he still has to be kind of very careful. So that's why they have generated this whole kind of courtship thing, just to make sure that she hasn't been bred, because if she has, then she'll chase him out. She won't want him to come around. But they do talk to each other just to see if she's receptive or not.
And what's the biggest insect we have at the zoo?
The biggest insect, it's probably the katydids, the giant katydids that I just showed you. Also, they might. Maybe the thorny devils. We don't have them in this building, but some of them, they're on an exhibit.
Want to go see the katydids?
Exhibit in sorry, the katydids again. Sure. So the stick insect, the Malayan wood nymphs, which I have some, but they're just babies right now. But they can get really huge. So they're almost like a foot long, really, those things, and they can get fairly wide as well. But these animals, once they become adults, they'll be quite large. Should I show you a dead one? I can show a dead one. So this is as big as it'll hopefully get. So this is probably the mom of some of these ones. She laid eggs last summer, and so they're hatching out now. They hatched out kind of, I guess, in the beginning of the year, really. Okay, all right. So I think that's. Hopefully you guys will visit me again. and I can show you some more of my fun critters in here. Thanks again, and have a great day, and keep social distancing. Bye for now.